We'll get started. I'm Laura Smits. Welcome. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Weston, as well as on the State League Board for Voter Service. This morning, we're going to have a lot of questions, I think. So let's get going. First, I'd like to encourage you to join the League, especially now, when things are incredibly important. Democracy is definitely not a spectator sport anymore, if it ever was. Also, this is brought to you by our Education Fund, and we always welcome donations to that. There are materials outside on the table if you are interested. And also, the Know Your Town directory is available online, as well as in print, but the online version is more up to date. And there's a link from the town website as well as our own website. So please visit that if you need that information. It's very helpful. Okay, I'm going to take the mic and pass it along to everyone here, and they're going to introduce themselves and tell you what board they're on, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Brian.
Hi, thanks for coming. My name is Brian Gordon. I'm on the Board of Selectmen.
Chris Spaulding for Selectman, and thank the League and thank all the citizens for coming out.
Stephen Grosinger, Board of Selectmen.
Bill McCursey, Superintendent of Schools.
Gina Albert, Chair of the Board of Education.
Alan Swerdlow, Chair of the Building Committee.
Adam Dunsby, I'm your state representative.
Hi, I'm Ken Edgar. I'm the Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I'm Steve Ezzies. I'm Chair of the Board of Finance.
Good morning, Ed Henyon. I'm your Police Chief.
Good morning, Bill Brady, Chairman of the Police Commission.
Ann Hunt, Library Chairman.
I'm Jonathan Luiz. I'm the Town Administrator.
Good morning. I'm Mark Cooper, Director of Health for the Westport Weston Health District.
Paul Deisenroth, Chairman, Historic District Commission.
To stand. Michael Schlechter, Chief, Weston EMS.
Natalie Terrill, Chair of Sustainability Committee.
Okay, actually, before we start the questions, I forgot one of the most important things, the rules. This is going to be important. No personal attacks. Questions, comments should be about a subject being discussed, not the person representing the board or commission. Statements may be made instead of questions. However, the moderator has the right to limit the length of a statement so that others may have a turn. The moderator may also determine when a subject has been exhausted and may ask for a question about a different topic. She may, however, return to the previous topic after others have had a chance. People with questions must stand, use the microphone in the back, and state their name and address. A question may be answered by more than one official if deemed necessary by the moderator. The object of Speak Up is to give as many citizens as possible an opportunity to ask questions. The moderator has discretion as to how many questions may be asked by the same person. We ask that participants remain civil at all times and respectful of the officials. Thank you. Margaret?
Hi, Margaret Württemberg, Wilson Road, and my question is for the Planning and Zoning Commission. I noticed that the P&Z has sent out a request for qualifications for planners to work on the new town plan. I was wondering, I know people in town love their land use issues and things like that. And I was wondering if you could tell me, Ken, how you're planning on doing the plan, or just generally speaking, when we can all get involved?
I suppose I should stand. So the state requires that the Planning and Zoning Commission every 10 years render a plan of conservation and development, also known as the POCD. Essentially, under this plan, we're required to review the State of the Union for the town of Weston, and basically that's a long process that we've just begun. We sent out a request for qualifications, and we're going to have professional help, both from psychiatry and from from town sources to get us through this. Essentially, the process is we put out a RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. Then there'll be an RFP, request for proposals. We'll hire someone to help us outside. This is a long process. We hope to get finished by December 31st, 2019. We're required to finish the process sometime in 20, but we hope to be a little bit early. We'll be doing extensive surveys of townspeople to see what they want. If you go and read the statute, which is a fascinating exercise, you'll find that there are many, many subjects that we're required to address, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us as we go through the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Come on. It's always tough in the beginning, and then everybody's at the end of the line at the end. So please, if you have a question, there we go. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Michelle Halpin. I live on Northfield Farm Lane. In light of the recent changes to the beach passes over in the town of Westport, what is Weston planning on doing to increase Weston amenities? We're getting a lot of pushback from Westporters for using up their resources. We need some of our own. So can you shed a little light on that, please?
Thank you, Michelle. We have actually begun discussing amenities already in the workshop that the Selectman had in the first couple of weeks of the administration. We did lay out a series of potential amenities to begin contemplating. We're going to now look to reach out, probably in conjunction with the POCD effort, to do a citizen-type survey to reach out to the citizens to see what kind of amenities they're interested in. So that said, we're also constantly open to hearing from the public any specific ideas, and particularly specific ideas with ideas how to offset the funding, because that's an issue in terms of keeping taxes at a reasonable rate, at the same time growing amenities, to potentially attract new people. That said, part of our initiative at this current time is to put forth a set of amenities. One of them that's budgeted that you can consider an amenity or not is we are instituting this software program that's called See-Click Fix. That will be a program that lets citizens report back to the town when they see, trees down, roads falling apart, signs bent, anything like that. That will now be logged in a digital format through an app, and we'll make sure we can follow up on it and also have some accountability in terms of timing to respond to that. So that said, the short answer is we are contemplating those ideas, and we're going to reach out to the citizenry to find out which of those ideas they want to pursue.
Thank you. Next question. We have also, just so we know, and until everybody gets up to the mic, we've been joined by Senator Toni Hwang and Senator Toni Boucher. The Tonys, we call them affectionately. Okay, don't all fight for it at once. I know you're itching. I know you can. I can just see it on your faces. You all want to go ahead. Great. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Hi. My name is Larry Shaw. I live on Blueberry Hill Road. This question is directed to Chris and Brian, and the chair of the Sustainability Committee. Weston is a leading town in almost everything in the world, except in one area. We are behind the country of Rwanda, and that is plastic bags. There's been a discussion going for a few years, and Westport, is a leading town in terms of plastic bags. And I worked on it for a while. The Sustainability Committee has been working on a policy, and I know the Selectman. So I wonder if you could speak to the issue of how do we go forwards in terms of legislation, maybe as some kind of a way of improving, obviously taking into concern of the store owners in this town. There's a win-win situation out there somewhere where people can use reusable bags and plastic bags can be phased out and ultimately disappear like, many other towns across Connecticut. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Larry. Sustainability has been a big push for the Selectmen, both in concept and in enactment. We just signed a deal to provide solar-based energy to the grid in Connecticut, and thus have a reduced amount of dirty energy going into the overall grid, and we're participating by putting 2 megawatts of that into the system. That said, in terms of the plastic bags themselves, we've been having ongoing conversations. Initially, the selectmen were involved at the point where we now have a functioning and an exceptional sustainability committee. We've sort of handed off that initiative to them. We understand that they have started contemplating it, and I'm going to actually turn it over to Natalie to finish this up, but thank you for bringing up the question.
Thanks, Chris. So, Larry, we have been working on the sustainability language for the bags and reusable bags, and a hopefully successful campaign for informing the citizens of the problems associated with plastic bag use. And we have a special meeting on Tuesday night where we're going to continue the discussions and drafts of language for that. We are inviting all of the businesses to a meeting that's taking place on Thursday night to discuss it with the vendors and the businesses to hopefully come up with a draft of language that works for both the businesses and for the health of the community, and something that works with the residents. And then we'll be discussing it further with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. Steve, did you want? Oh, okay. All right, good to know. Thank you.
So, excuse me, I'm Steve Ezzies. I'm Chairman of the Board of Finance. I actually have a question for our state representatives. It's not often we can have all three here at one time. There's a lot going on in Hartford. If you haven't had the opportunity to read the Hartford Courant and the Connecticut Mirror regarding, we have a budget deficit that we're going to have to close between now and the end of the fiscal year, and I thought it would be helpful, and there's conversations about a gas tax increase, tolls, and so, and if there's more, let me know, but hopefully not, but it's a great opportunity to have the three of you here, so I thought I'd ask the question, what's going on, and from your vantage point in Hartford.
Well, as the chair, one of the chair people of the Transportation Committee, you can imagine how much attention I'm giving this, and also as Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee on taxes additionally, so a lot of those proposals are going to be coming through both of those committees. I will tell you that right now, almost to a person that I speak with, they do not want one more penny in tax increases in the state. They're already feeling overburdened, particularly in our part of the state that pay the vast majority of the taxes. The debate will center around this particular budget period. You're correct, we are about $200 million in deficit right now, and the following year $258 million as we speak. So everything will be focused on this budgetary problem that the state has. Right now, the governor has put out this alarm, and we're still trying to figure out if it's valid, an alarm of not having anything very shortly in the transportation fund. There are many that disagree with that. Maybe that's setting up a scenario so that more taxes will be more palatable to individual legislators. But I can tell you that we will be opposing certainly a $3 tax on any new tire you buy, and an increase of 7 cents. In the gas tax, even some of the most progressive on the other side of the aisle proposed a 4-cent increase, not a 7-cent increase. And tolls, I think that I could go on probably for 2 hours on that. I will be opposing it for multiple of reasons because, quite frankly, the added benefit is not large enough, and the years to get it implemented would take too long, and we would lose $500 million already that we get from the feds, as well as we have a car property tax, several other taxes that other states do not have when they do have tolls. So the case has yet to be made because we still have to look at what we have currently in that fund that has been rated and has been shortchanged first before we go in this direction.
So I'll just want this to go to the subject of tolls. I think we will be voting on that. The leadership of the legislature has said we will be voting on tolls. I mean, I'm opposed, but I do think that the people who are in favor of tolls have actually probably done a little bit better job of creating a scenario favorable to them than those opposed. I just want to give you a little bit of information. So first of all, just to take a big step back, there's basically two main funds for the state. There's a general fund, which is like $18 billion a year, which runs the state. And then there's when you hear the term special transportation fund, that's money that's segregated for transportation. Unfortunately, the legislature has taken tens of millions of dollars out of that over the years. But that's a fund that's set up just for transportation. I think we generate about $1.5 billion a year that goes into that. So just to give some information, Connecticut has a 25-cent gas tax, which is one of the higher ones in the country. There's also a gross motors fuel tax, or called something like that, which generates about 14 cents, 8%. So that's 39 cents basically at the pump, which is one of the highest in the country right now. In addition, the sales tax in Connecticut is 6.35%. 0.5% of that, 50 basis points, that goes directly into the special transportation fund. The sales tax from cars is being transitioned, so that goes just into the special transportation fund. Trucks that are from out of state must pay the fuel tax, so that money goes into the special transportation fund. So this is always couched in terms of we need more revenue, we need new revenue. We do have a lot of revenue, and we do also have new revenue, which is going into that fund. My suggestion would be is we need to look at some other things. Like, for instance, in that list that the governor put out of all these possibly essential projects that are now on hold, well, look at the list. On that list, there's $100 million for a train station in Bridgeport, which is right next to the other train station in Bridgeport, which is just a couple miles away from Fairfield Metro, which we just opened a couple years ago. We don't need a train station every 15 feet. So we need to fund transportation. We need to see what projects we need for safety. We haven't gotten that list. We need to see what projects we need to keep the infrastructure we have working. We haven't gotten that list. We have some of the highest administrative costs and bureaucratic costs for transportation in the state. We can deal with that. We have prevailing wage laws, which makes the cost of transportations much, much higher than they need to be. So there's a lot of things to look at. So I think tolls, someday if electric cars take over, then sure, we're going to have to get rid of the gas tax and do something else. But that's not material right now. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of information. And I think we're far, far away from saying that tolls are something that we need, and it's something I don't support right now.
To shore up the comments that were so expertly made, the general average rule is that it costs 100, I believe it is 100 million for a certain amount of roadway on a national average. In Connecticut, it is 3 times that amount, 400. And that is exorbitantly high on that point. And it was also suggested to me that we could get a couple $100 million from the feds to close that gap if we were able to convince our U.S. representatives to make sure that Connecticut gets its share, because we are underfunded for what we give in taxes on the federal level as well.
Well, if the Senator allow, I'll add some things too. I'm Senator Toni Hwang, and I think we have to begin by understanding that we are in a state fiscal crisis. And all the things you're going to hear about is predicated on the fact that we need additional revenue for infrastructure, for education, for taking care of those most at risk and vulnerable. I agree. We have to do all of that. But as said earlier, the state of Connecticut just went through 2 of the highest record tax increases in the history of this state. And we collect revenue from so many different sources. And what's remarkable, and people tend to have short memories, is the fact that despite all of that, we are $4.5 billion in deficit. It is a system that is unsustainable. Even the revenue commissioner, who has been in government for over 35 years, have said, we can't tax people anymore, because if we could and succeed, we would. Even he realizes that any additional taxes is regressive. It is going to be counterproductive. So now we come up with this wonderful solution called We need our roads to be fixed. We need our bridges to be fixed. We need our rails to be worked on, right? I would ask all of you to do a check mark every time you hear a conversation begin with tolls. It will be prefaced by, our roads are horrible. Our trains aren't on time. That's you. No, that's me, maybe.
It's amazing. I have to remind the people on the stage to turn their phones off. Seriously.
So the premise is, let's reprioritize government. Let's look at what our priorities are. And it's critical for us to begin this dialogue. I think one of the first things that we want to look at is it sustainable and is it practical for the state of Connecticut to lock ourselves into a 10-year labor agreement, which allows 4 years of no layoff provision, terms, pensions, and benefits that are far more lucrative than any of you have seen. It is important for us to understand that. So I won't say blankly no to tolls or gas taxes or any sort of revenue, because we're not going to be able to cut spending out of this deficit. But I would ask for us to work in a genuine, transparent, and bipartisan basis and put everything on the table. Everything has to be put on the table. And the people of Weston are very lucky. When we had the fiscal crisis last budget year, with about a third of the teacher's pension being redistributed to our towns, and we had a meeting with our superintendent, Board of Finance, and the Board of Education, and the town leaders. Bottom line, there were no Democrat or Republican. There was a steadfast commitment that we are going to do in the town of Weston what is absolutely necessary to maintain the standard of education and the quality of life that this town stands for. And if the state doesn't help, stay out of the way. That was a powerful statement that the state should learn from the town of Weston and its leaders, is the bottom line: be accountable, be transparent, and create a system that's predictable and sustainable. And if we do that, I think we can get out of the hole that we're in the state. But the fact that saying no right away is not the way to go. And my way or the highway, it doesn't work in my own household, and it shouldn't work up in the state.
Okay, thank you. Can we have if you have a question, you have to go back to the mic, Ellen. Yes. We have. Okay, hold on, wait. Ellen's up, and then we'll go to you, Fran.
You want to come to the mic?
She can't.
Thank you. Toni and Toni, talking about tolls, why is it that since we're in the era of Easy Pass, why can't we only toll the people who are coming from out of state, like trucks, et cetera, people coming from Massachusetts? Everyone in the tri-state area is using our state, and we're the only ones without tolls.
You got that, Chris?
I have a two-part.
One sec. Let her answer. Question, Fran's question, and then we'll get to you, Ellen. Sorry.
It's okay. I got to put my glasses on. See somebody's.
Hold
up
on
there.
1 sec. Okay, Toni.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I get that asked every day, maybe twice a day, by radio anchors and so forth. Because let's face it, and I look as well when I'm on the roads, particularly on the weekend, it seems like 100% of the cars around me are from other states. And in fact, that's probably true on the weekends. But drive during the week, and even the DOT has said 75% of those that would be burdened with a toll would be Connecticut residents. Now, others have said, well, let's give them a break. And you can, because I do have an Easy Pass as well, and I drive all over the area. And in Massachusetts just recently, right? Massachusetts has a lower cost for a Massachusetts transponder, but they can't keep it just for Massachusetts residents. I buy mine in New York, so I get the discount for New York. If I wanted to buy one from Massachusetts, I would get the lower discount. If we had one in Connecticut, we would have to sell it to anyone that wants it out of state or in state. The bottom line is not so much, it is easier now. It's seamless, you just drive right through. You know, just recently there was a report that Virginia was increasing their toll road on Route 66 to $30. There's even one now that's being proposed for congestion pricing that would be $46. There are states in...
That's a little inaccurate. Those are special lanes to avoid the rest of the traffic. Those are not the main roads.
Yes, that's correct. And if you go, excuse me, but if you go to Florida, there are excess lanes that you can use. And by the way, I'm in favor of those. If Connecticut had the capacity to do that, we don't have the capacity here at this point. In Florida, you can use the toll road or you can use the non-toll road, which is ultimately fair for those that can afford to do that. I agree. We cannot do that here. If you look at what the schematic shows, you wouldn't believe the number of toll stops we would have from the border all the way through New Haven and beyond. And it would have to be on not just 95. Now think about the spillover to the Merritt and our capacity there right now. The idea of talking about tolls, which is another tax right now, in the environment that we are living in right now, on top of, and it's not in place of, because other states that have them, it's in place of other types of taxes that they enact. We have a car property tax. They don't have that in New York and other states as well. We have an income tax that is non-deductible. Mostly all of the other states have ability to deduct off of that. We have, as just was mentioned by Representative Dunsby, we have a very high gas tax, and if these proposals go through, the proposals are tolls and gas tax increases and a tax on tire. In addition, piling on to a point where we are still questioning whether that's necessary. Are we using our funds that we have properly? The administration has underfunded. We're supposed to get at least $100 to $160 million a year into the special transportation fund. We're not supposed to rate it, and they take another $30 million out of it in addition to that. And in fact, if the $170 million was not rated or taken out of that in the last few years, even the DOT commissioner says we wouldn't have a problem right now at all. We have proposed an alternative plan for bonding transportation projects called Prioritize Progress. We've put it on the table time and again. The administration won't even look at it. That shows how we can gain, for current resources, current bonding, $500 million a year. And that doesn't include the matching grants we would get from the federal government itself. So we're going to have quite a debate about this. We keep listening to it. If we had the ability to have voluntary lanes, I'm all for it. That's great. But right now, this would be the most burdensome on those least ability to pay, congestion pricing, because we can't put in tolls, reenact it, unless it's congestion pricing, which means higher, and that's what those higher costs were during certain times of the day. And who has flexibility in their work schedule? Not the boss. It's the lower level employees that have to get to work at 8 o'clock. That's why we have traffic jams. They would be the ones most burdened and the ones that have to go across. And quite frankly, I'm just going to end with that a gas tax increase is most fair versus a toll. You can see we're going to have quite a debate.
I know, it's very controversial. We're going to keep going because we have some people standing up with questions about local issues. Thank you.
I have a two-part question, environmental question, one regarding fracking and two regarding spraying poison on our lawns to keep them nice and green. I think this should be directed probably toward the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, pass that mic.
So is that the question, what we're doing about those things?
I want to know what you're doing about fracking and about spraying poison on lawns, because my dog has gotten sick from some of the neighbors' poisons.
Understand. So again, these are issues that will necessarily go through Sustainability Committee, but in terms of fracking, the Sustainability Committee has provided us with some guidance and a recommendation to consider a fracking waste ban. We began contemplating it at the last Board of Selectmen meeting. We voted to refer the specific ordinance to Town Council in order to review, to give us a sort of a checklist of the pros and cons, the potential impacts of going forward with that. So that is moving forward through process. Once that is vetted and comes back to the Selectmen, we will schedule a public hearing to discuss it and to see whether there's interest in the citizenry to pursue that. In terms of what's going on the lawns, I do think we don't have a current initiative, but I do think it's something that's critically necessary. The entire town basically with the exceptions of the schools and a few houses on Ravenwood, relies on wells, and we rely on septics, and the water table is extremely important to us, and our water courses and wetlands are critical to maintaining Weston's quality of life. That said, a lot of people don't understand the impact of what they're putting on the lawn and how that affects, the hydrological ecosystem, basically. The fact that, runoff from lawns causes phosphorus and potassium blooms in the wetlands, and that seals it up because it grows, because it doesn't just grow on your lawn, it grows wherever else it goes. Also, people's lawns frequently are where their wells are housed, right? So whatever you're putting on top of it, and pesticides and herbicides, that's going into the well water now. Somewhat it can get filtered through the ground penetration, but it is a problem, and it is something I would hope that sustainability will be looking into going forward. But I think it is a critical issue to look at in Weston.
Thanks, Chris. So the Sustainability Committee is looking at launching and planning on launching actually a low-impact living series to start to educate and advocate for a more low-impact living for sustainability issues like this. So it will cover all kinds of topics. Well maintenance, septic maintenance are certainly a really big issue. Not everybody has the same depth of well or the same age of well at their homes, and they're definitely things to consider, especially with the contamination due to herbicides and pesticides, pet waste, all kinds of things. And so issues with all of these things that go into the well, into the ground, how it gets dealt with. There will be a large range of topics that we'll be discussing. We're going to be working with other local organizations, and we'll be bringing in experts to start to create this lecture series for the town.
Just as a point of information, I actually attended a demonstration of organic lawn care where the person who was demonstrating ate it in front of us. So
that's a thing.
It's good for the immune system, I believe. Okay, thank you for that. Farm to table in its most extreme form. Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Parker. I live on Richmond Hill Road. I have to say I'm a little nervous before this important and illustrious panel. In fact, the first rule of public speaking is never follow the best speaker. So here I am. My comments are for the Police Commission and the Chief of Police, where I'm asking for help in keeping Lord's Highway Extension safe from traffic accidents. Now, and I have handouts for you later. Lord's Highway Extension is classified as a rural local road. It is the smallest and most minor of all road classifications. The travel lane width required is 10 feet or a 20-foot wide road. Now, the town engineer's traffic study given to the Board of Selectmen on January 18th claims that Lord's Highway Extension is 18 feet wide, still less than that 20, consisting of two 9-foot lanes. He goes on to recommend that a driveway into the dog park at the Moore property, which is very close to Richmond Hill, and with a turnaround should be constructed, specifically mentioning in his presentation that this would be appropriate for emergency vehicles. He concludes that there is no need for roadway reconfiguration, and therefore there would be no added expense. Now, I can tell you that this is absolutely false. It's a game of chicken to start from one end of Lord's Highway East or extension to the other, and you cannot pass in front. You just can't pass. You'll have a collision. So the road is simply not wide enough. It's only 15 feet 9 inches. That's without a shoulder, so that makes it 7 feet 8 inches wide. The other approach to the dog park would be Davis Hill and Lord's Highway Extension. This measures 16 feet wide or 8 feet 5 inches per lane. Now, the average SUV is 7 feet wide. A school bus or an ambulance is 8 feet wide. A fire truck measures 9 to 10 feet wide. And in a report given by the New Canaan, Connecticut fire commissioner states that you need at least 12 feet wide for a fire engine to safely get to it going, and 20-foot radius to turn. Any questions so far?
Well, do you have a question?
I do. I'm asking. I do.
You have a question.
What
Great.
I'm asking is that the police commission and the police chief and the police department look carefully at this, because it's putting a dog park there is only going to bring more injuries, more related accidents, and fire trucks and such shouldn't get there. It's absolutely essential not to allow Lord's Highway East, and I'd like them to vote no when it comes to the commission vote.
Okay, so
That's
the
me.
question is?
My question is, I need help. That's my...
Okay.
I need help in looking at this truthfully so that everybody understands that this is a 15-foot wide road.
With regard to the road
Yes.
access?
Thank you.
Okay. Bill?
I think that one of the first things you want to do is meet with the town engineer.
Yes.
So you actually find out if there's some road improvements that will have to be made.
I'm going back to his report given to the Board of Selectmen January 18th, where he says there's no road reconfiguration or improvement needed.
Well, I haven't seen that specific study. It has not come before the commission at this point in time. But if and when it does, of course, then we'll be asking those same types of questions.
Okay, thank you. Next question?
Thanks. Thank you. The name is Eldon, and I live on Godfrey, 109 Godfrey. It's almost humor now that people are leaving Connecticut. It's not a matter of when, it's how quick can you get out before everybody else. That's not good because of what's happening. And I noticed that, like in the terms of the gun companies. Texas said, come on down, we'll build your building. We've got whoever you don't bring with you, we'll plug them in. And they're making prosperity. They're doing fine. No matter what you think about any of this, you're losing population and you're losing businesses. The best people, the smartest people, and the people with the most money are most able to relocate. So you sort of purge, you come up with the people eventually that can't leave. It's not a good thing. And my question is this, in the big picture, what happens? I mean, you can argue the fine points of some kind of a tax or a new fee or something, but all that does is put more of a wedge between people and Connecticut. What is the real solution? Unless it's to run it down and then sell Connecticut to somebody else, some foreign entity maybe. What is the real solution? How do you turn it around? You can't just tax people. And nobody's coming in. The real estate is in question. Who wants to buy into that? So that's my question is, in the big picture, how do you do it? How do you make this attractive? Thanks.
Okay, Senator, you guys want to fight over that one?
I think, as I said earlier, we in state government should reflect the habits and the priorities and the approach of households that we represent. As I mentioned earlier, our towns are accountable and they are engaged in listening to what the interest of the community is. So I think that's really a good start. And as we talk about revenue shortfalls and looking at different paths of revenue, I would also throw caution to this. We're looking at more revenue, but we haven't solved the problem. We have not addressed the fundamental problem of how government is functioning. It isn't working. And we can't continue to tax people and throw money at a problem. I mean, 25 years ago, we thought the income tax was going to be the panacea to solve all of our income ills. We've gone woefully short. If I could share a chart that is that is commonly available that showed Connecticut's population going this way, inflation relatively flat, and the cost of government, it is unsustainable. So I offer to you again, we need to get to the symptom of what's causing the problem, not simply feeding it with more money. That's the challenge. And I will offer this to you. We hadn't even come close to making the necessary decisions because you have not seen people upset. You thought last year was challenging? If we were truly honest in state government in doing the necessary structural changes, you're going to hear a lot more. And we need to do that. We need to have the political courage to stand up and say, what are our priorities? Is it a bigger government, or is it to ensure that those that are most at risk, most vulnerable in our society, our seniors, our children and their education are their priorities? Then let's put money to that and get rid of the growing bureaucracy of entitled and entrenched political interest and government interests. So, see, here's my point on that.
Has favored illegals. Your governor has subsidized all kinds of people, but not me.
I hear you on that, but here's the beauty of Speak Up Weston. And I said earlier, you've got people that have taken out a Saturday afternoon to come and hear and be engaged. So it's not what the president's doing or what the governor's doing, but all of you doing your bit and holding your elected representatives here accountable, because they represent you at the grassroots level, and that is a great way to start. So I think that's the point I would offer is, we're here listening to you, and we're accountable to you directly.
Okay, no, Don, we can't talk back to the, sorry. Let's continue. I think we get it. We've got a lot of issues on the state level. Let's not keep rehashing that one if we can go along and get some more questions. Sir.
Good morning, and thank you so much for being here and willing to listen to us. My name is Michael Lubell. I've been a Connecticut resident since 1963, and so I've seen a whole lot of things going on. You mentioned taxes, and yet I have yet to hear any commentary about the impact of the new federal tax law. I've looked at that very seriously. I've spoken to some of you sitting up there. And in my own case, I just did an analysis. My federal tax burden next year will be going up by $10,000. And I think that's probably true for a number of people here. The question that I have, twofold. Number one, the proposition that several towns in New Jersey and California have looked at, whether towns can in fact declare themselves as 501c3s for certain purposes, collect revenue from residents, give them tax credits on the balance that they would have to pay in terms of real estate taxes. That's fully deductible under the new tax law. And I would like to see Connecticut far more involved with doing the sorts of things that New Jersey and California have already declared that they're going to do. That's number one. Number two, on another federal issue, the proposed, we haven't seen the details of it, but the proposal for infrastructure, which the president has said $1 trillion, well, it's actually $200 billion over 10 years that the federal government will put up, $800 billion coming from other places, including states. Has any planning been done at this stage to look at how Connecticut is going to respond to this? I would appreciate comments on both issues that I raised.
Republicans, go for it. Chris.
We have talked about the charity issue, and I have reached out to other municipalities. One of the challenges was that with that specific scheme, and it's still being researched legally, is that it would first of all only work for people who don't have kids, because if you have kids and you declare your donations to education as a charitable gift, it breaches the restrictions on the tax code that you are expecting to get something back. So that's a concern. The other concern is the overall legality of it in general at this thing. And you're right that New Jersey and California have had some limited success in pushing that forward. So what's happening now, I can tell you from reaching out to my colleagues at WestCog, which is the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. It's all the first selectmen and mayors of all the towns in the region. We are looking into it. Some towns are pursuing it specifically in terms of getting legal opinions. As we get opinions back, if it does look like it's something that will hold, we'll certainly consider it. And I'll push part of that back to our state representatives, because that brings up a good point. There are some initiatives in New York and New Jersey where they are looking at recharacterizing withholding and creating a state salary withholding line that would be exempt and actually allow more withholding and then less of state income for the people who do work in state to be considered as something that would be subject to the national stuff. So I'll just throw it in there as long as you're answering.
So I think Chris is probably right to the issue of the tax issue. The issue of trying to recharacterize the income as or the tax as a charitable distribution, charitable payment, that's probably problematic. I think most of the analysis I've read on that suggests that that's a less likely path that's going to work. Not that it's impossible, but the IRS could just easily rule that this is just a tax avoidance mechanism and disallow it. What might be more promising is having, on the tax side, having taxes withheld as payroll taxes. And I think if that works for the state of Connecticut, I'm sure we'll all support something like that. Connecticut, our legislature, our session starts next week, so we're a little bit behind some of the other states, which may be why you haven't heard as much from the Connecticut side. And the governors will give a speech, I assume, on Wednesday, so we'll see what his thoughts are. But I think this is something that we will be talking about. It probably is worth pointing out that. In many parts of Connecticut, this is a very popular tax change. I've heard that 70% of Connecticut residents don't itemize their deductions, so they're getting a big increase in their taxes are going down. So in wealthier parts of the state, it depends on your situation. So you've relayed your situation, sure, which I understand. It depends on obviously your income, your deductions, because the tax rate's going down. Corporate tax rate is going down, so if you have a corporate income or your own equities, you're making more money through that as well. So politically, I just say it's because politically, one of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with that in much of the state, the tax change is popular and liked. In wealthier parts of the state, it depends. But I know it's something we will be talking about. I think if something happens, it's more likely to be on the payroll side. And I assume we'll start talking about that next week after the governor gives his speech.
As Adam just said, this is going to possibly pit part of Connecticut. It doesn't matter what political party you are. It just depends on where you're most affected. And there's no question the burden of this is probably going to fall most heavily here in this part of the state. I can tell you that the 3 governors that got together to do a lawsuit against this is a waste of money. It's not going anywhere. That's what most legal scholars say. As far as the charitable deduction, I did just read the legislation that California is trying to enact. It's still very uncertain if that's going to pass legal muster. That's also problematic in that area. However, the payroll portion of this, as Adam and others have just said, that is a place where a lot of discussion will take place. But remember, Connecticut is perceived as very anti-business. Businesses are not going to really like being able to do this, and how it would affect their business climate as well. The second half of that question was yet to be answered, and that is the new proposals that are being brought out about how to fund transportation projects. Remember, the federal government pays 80%, the states pay 20%. They are thinking of reversing that, so how would you make up the difference? It seems unlikely that states could afford that, but what they're looking at is private partnerships. And I'm very hesitant. I have looked into some of that. For example, the private purchase of a toll road, or at least paying for a new road, and the private entity then would have to charge a fee. And it has had problems in other states. So there's going to be a lot more discussion on this point. It is true that we are not starting until next week, for sure. But just a little bit of a shout out to someone that really wanted solutions. There are some of us that do see solutions to the state's problems. And a lot of it has to do with creating a positive business climate, and to reduce the burdens on the business sector through regulation. It's reforming our tax policy. It's changing our negotiating process for public sector costs, which are through the ceiling. The fringes have gone up nearly 100% in that area. Has to be right-sized with our local town of Weston contracts with their employees. If the state employees would accept those kinds of contract changes, we would be in much better shape. We should not have collective bargaining at the state level employees. 46 other states do not. We have to better manage our departments and restructure them, particularly the DMV. I have a lot of other solutions to this.
Okay, thank you.
And I thank you for that opportunity.
We're getting into the weeds now. Okay, thank you so much. Sir?
Hi, I'm Peter Blau from Lions Plain Road, and I have a question about the article about the solar deal. It sounds like the town has already entered an agreement with someone who's proposing to do something which is good, which is save the town money and also promote the use of renewable green energy. But I wondered if the selectmen were aware of the fact that this particular vendor who's in the business of selling to governments, has in fact sued several governments, including the state of Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, California, and even sued against the developer of wind energy that would have spoiled the owner's views from his $15 million house in Edgartown. And given the town's past history of being sued by a solar contractor when the deal didn't go through, and paying an expensive settlement and legal fees, did the selectmen look at all the possible liabilities, considering that they were dealing with a person whose business model seems to be to generate lawsuits in addition to electricity?
I'm going to turn it over to town.
Thank you.
To our town administrator, but we did actually have 4 different attorneys on our side alone vetting this. But I'm now going to let Jonathan Luiz, our town administrator.
Yeah, it's a good question. I did. We had 4 attorneys look into it. We had our in-house attorney, attorney that the town itself hired from the outside, who's done these virtual net metering deals before, and also the school had their in-house counsel as well as an outside counsel look into the deal. So the contract itself, we feel, is pretty tight. I did check references from other municipalities, particularly in Massachusetts, that have done deals with this company, and they said that they're happy with the deal. I'm also aware of the litigation that you reference it. You can just Google the company and find out all about that. But those, in my opinion, were big picture regulatory issues and not over solar virtual net metering deals like we did.
I'm just wondering if you were aware of his past, which in doing these leaseback deals on sewage treatment plants and the experience of Rapid City, South Dakota.
I'm sorry, could you?
Before, this guy's not an energy person per se, he's a financier. And before the virtual net metering thing came about, which is very recently, he was also involved in leaseback of public facilities like sewage treatment plants, which was a fad a number of years ago. And apparently there was a good deal of unhappiness with his dealings with the city of Rapid City, South Dakota.
Yeah, I saw that one online too on Google. And again, this is not a leaseback type deal with us. Our sewer treatment plant is not involved. None of our property is involved. This is about a solar farm on the eastern part of Connecticut out near Yukon Stores. And it's a deal where this farm is not owned by us. And for some reason, this farm doesn't function. This farm doesn't produce the electrons that we're anticipating. Then we don't pay them. So we've protected ourselves based on the discussions with the attorneys.
Okay, thank you.
And there are several provisions in those contracts where we have outs. One is that the contract itself is subject to the ATVM process. So if something happens with the particular company, and again, I think if you're talking about the primary agent for the contract, for the proposal, they're going to be handing it off now to the people who manage and build the field. There's that. There's also a change in law provision so that if statewide law changes, we'll revert back to a situation before the contract existed. So we did put a lot of provisions. With anybody who's been involved in finance for a while, there are going to be a litigation history. I do appreciate your vigilance in bringing that up. It's that kind of focus that our citizenry has that makes most of the work that we do in Weston pretty efficient, and again, it's a completely different sort of structure than the past deals. But I think Dr. McCursey would like to throw in something.
Hi, everyone. Since the Board of Education is one of the largest energy users in the town, we were part of this process. We had our own in-house counsel involved, and then we also reached out to the law firm that handles a lot of our business and worked specifically with an attorney with extensive experience in power purchase agreements. We were advised by our attorneys that we were very well protected with this contract. In this particular situation, in this particular farm, there are approximately 20 municipalities involved, and then they are very happy with the service that they've received, and we've been assured by our attorneys that our contract will protect us.
Okay, thank you. Next question?
Last thing on that.
Okay.
Under one scenario, we could be saving up to $4.3 million over 25 years, so that's good there, too.
Okay, great. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Tim Zach. I live on Valley Forge Road. About 3 years ago, my wife and I moved here for various, positive reasons, one of which is education. And given I was just wondering if you guys could speak to, given the cuts in, spending on education that various towns, are being affected by, some of which I think, that have very substantial, rankings in the state. And I'm just kind of wondering how or what resources might be affected in regards to those cuts, and what the town might be doing to, possibly, overcome some of those obstacles.
Bill McCursey, Superintendent. Let me say a few things, then Gina may join in as chair. We have put forward to the board, and the board scrutinized it in great detail. It's now going to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, a budget that on the special education side is a growth budget. Otherwise, it's a reduction budget. We look very carefully at the fiscal crisis that Connecticut's in. We study that very, very carefully in Weston. So Weston public schools are in a new era. They're in a new era where we're bringing great scrutiny to every single dollar U.S. taxpayers put forward. So that's why as we looked at, we are on the special ed side, and let me say something that this entire town has to hear. We are embracing every single student in the district. Right now, we are in a fiscal crisis as it relates to providing services for our special education students. That is not a comment on those students. That is not a comment on their families. It's a comment on a state situation that has driven many of the districts around us into very negative balances. Right now, we're carrying a $1.4 million shortfall. Last year was $800,000 on our out-of-district unilateral placement lines. For 7 of the last 8 years, we've had this overage. Greenwich has $1 million over. Brookfield's $1 million over. Other districts around us for the same exact reason. We have a crisis as to how we provide the services these families ethically, morally, and legally need. It's a multi-year run. What I can guarantee you as superintendent, as the board scrutinized us, it's a 3.14 increase solely for this special education issue. Just to plug the gap, it would be a 2.4 increase for you as taxpayers. Well, we as the administration said we can plug the gap, but not guarantee we will solve this now nearly 8-year run of a problem that's ballooned into a crisis. We were able to bring a negative $50,000 budget for everything else because of very strong collective bargaining agreements. We've now settled the lowest agreement with the teachers union in almost history in Weston. We've bought into the state health plan, which next year will save us over $500,000 as a town. We've looked long-term at enrollment issues. The budget has a nearly $250,000 drop in it due to a decrease in enrollment, still protecting class sizes, still protecting teachers. We've made nearly a 6 FTE reduction in the budget, staying away from the classrooms, but we're right up against it. So as we'll be working through with the Board of Selectmen starting Tuesday night, then the Board of Finance over a couple months, and then all of you as voters, we're saying if we can secure $391,000 from you, that's that increase, we think we can get ahead of this multi-year problem in special education, that for all the districts in this region, again, this is not about those students, this is not about those families, but it's about us assuring the high quality we have, but frankly, if we don't now, we're up against it. And the kind of question you're asking next year, the years after, we may be saying we're cutting substantially into core programs because we cannot afford it. So I just want to put that out there. It's going to be a very rich discussion over the next couple of months in Weston. But it's rooted in us understanding the fiscal challenges we have and having to provide for every single student. And we do look long-term. We budget year to year, but we look long-term. And this is a long-term budget based on next year.
Thank you.
And I just want to add on to that. I mean, Dr. McCursey did a fabulous job with some of the details, but even though we do have that cut in things other than special ed, our administration, down to like our teacher levels, have been very creative in finding ways to still provide enhancements. At our intermediate school, the principal came up with a phenomenal idea of introducing a brand new digital literacy program because our students are on Chromebooks and they need to have the knowledge about how to use those. By leveraging her own staff and being creative with the use of time, they have figured out a way to introduce that program with no excess cost to us. Because of the way our middle school math program works, children have been given the chance to develop at their own pace. As a result, our math CIL for the upper grades realized that she needed a new class. She worked with her math team, and at no cost, we are introducing a new math class for our freshmen next year, which is a geometry with advanced algebra. We have an innovative team, and I think that's the most important thing that the people of Weston need to know about. It is a truly team approach here. As Dr. McCursey referenced, collective bargaining with our teachers union. Our teachers care deeply about this district. They are invested in this district, and by working together with them, that's what makes Weston schools so special. And that's what everybody in Weston, parents and also longtime residents who don't have children in the schools, it's that connection and teamwork that really, really provide the foundation for how we move forward and how we manage this fiscal crisis that all of Connecticut is facing. Now, I'm actually going to take a moment to throw something back at our state reps here. One of the biggest issues we have here in Connecticut with special ed is the burden of proof. We are only one of 3 states in the country that have the burden of proof solely on the school district as we relate to this. That is a topic that Hartford has to address. We can't. But trust me, our team is working hard for your students.
Can you explain what burden of proof means?
Thank you. Maybe, Gina, can you do that, or, okay, Toni? Okay, thank you.
Basically what it means is if you have a student in the district who's receiving special ed services within the district, there's a collaborative relationship between the districts and the families. If a family reaches a point where they think that the district is not serving those needs, in the state of Connecticut, they have the right to basically pull their student and put them in a private facility. It's called a unilateral placement. And then there is a legal process mandated by Hartford where basically the entire burden of proof of trying to decide if that student can be served by our district or must be in a private placement is solely on us. Basically the complete expense. There are only 3 states in the entire country that have that process. It really puts, it's an undue burden on us. These families, we want to work with them and we want to have the opportunity to be a collaboration. And right now it's not once you reach that point.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we need to go there. We have more questions. I mean, I think it's great. Thank you very much.
Well, this is just a comment on the idea behind what the last 3 or 4 people have said, which is that whatever the legal and financial burdens that are being placed on us at all levels of government, we shouldn't lose our vision and our values, which is what you're saying, that it might be a money crisis, but in terms of we shouldn't allow that to lose something that is very important to this town. It seems foolish maybe to bring up the issue of the dog park. I see that, though, as an example of something. that I very much appreciate the issue of finances that's involved, of land use, but the fact of whether we have one or not, I think ignores something very fundamental that I have found in my work and in talking with individuals and as a pet lover, which is that the connection that people have with their pets are very, very special. You never see anything more poignant than grieving for a lost pet, or children who say that they can't forgive their parents for never having gotten them a dog. The meaning of this, I think, is very relevant to how we make decisions. And I am sympathetic to preserving my place in the middle of the woods, and I don't want anything to disrupt that. But I do think that this other issue, which has to do with humanity, human values, with visions for where the town should go, a dog park would make it possible, since this kind of connection is found in people across the generations. So it would make it possible, like Le Chat, to have something that's more multi-generational. Just a comment.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Next question.
Hi, Maria Proto. This is not about the dog park. This is to Dr. McCursey. This is difficult for me to talk about because it's very personal. I'm one of those parents that outplaces their child. And I'm listening to you guys talk about this, and I have to tell you that I did everything to keep my son here. And when I decided to outplace him, nobody asked me why. I did not get one question as to why. They were like, okay, goodbye, you're out the door. The problem that you guys have is you are not talking to the families who want to keep their kids in Weston so desperately. But we can't because the schools are not servicing them. And it's not the teachers, and I understand the schools have their hands tied with a lot of the curriculum that they can and they cannot offer. I literally had a teacher in second grade say, I know what your son needs and I can't do it. I can't do it. We're not allowed to do it in this school. So my advice, I don't know if this is a question or I'm just annoyed listening. Talk to the families that have outplaced their kids. Thank you. There are a lot of families that want to outplace their kids and they can't afford it. So you need to get together with the families that are outplacing their kids and find out why. Because I talk to the other parents and we have suggestions. And I know that you've had meetings with some groups of parents, but really, even a survey, even a phone call, somebody that had called me to say, where'd you go and why? All they did was call to say, are you gonna need the bus next year? That's the only call I got. And Gina, with all due respect, burden of proof, the cost to parents to outplace their kids and then to have to pay for lawyers to prove that kids that are literally failing, that the school's not meeting their needs. I mean, they know they're not meeting the needs. Believe me, when you have a kid that fails 4th grade, you're not meeting his needs. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate very much the frankness and openness. And any family or parent in your situation, it is incredibly difficult to get up and do what you did. And from my heart, I appreciate that. I ran focus groups for parents. I'm the first superintendent to do that. I ran focus groups for the staff on this issue. As families in this situation know, there's a degree of privacy for the child's reason, the family's reasons you cannot cross. Let me tell you what's inside this recommendation that now the town's going to be looking at that's in that 3.18. I am saying we have to do a lot better in Weston. I am saying that dramatically and strongly. And I'm saying we have to still embrace all our students. We need to add an assistant director. With 20% of our students somehow involved PPS, with 25% of our budget somehow involved, a director and assistant director cannot keep up. I'm not going to explain why you didn't hear. I cannot say that, but I can say I've got a long list of places we're falling short. And I think some things you alluded to are there. There is no way we can keep up with a director and assistant director given all of the personal, deeply emotional, and legal and financial issues that many of our families face. Once they're in an outplacement or even when they're considering it, we're not able to keep up. At the school level, we need to add more behavioral support. So in the recommendations to add another BCBA, so we have one at every single building. 75% of our outplaced students, there are about 39 of them. I can't go into any more detail. 70% have some sort of a behavioral emotional issue. We're not meeting that, so we need to meet that. So it's a BCA per every building. We're going to add, if everyone in the town agrees, a dedicated social worker. So we have a dedicated social worker at the high school and the middle school. That's also an attempt to address this. We're also going to add more assistive technology so that there's more immediate support digitally and otherwise for families with students who have needs. Then across the board at the high school, while 97% of our students go off to college, we've learned the class of 2012, those who are in the system, 100% of them graduate from college in 5 or 6 years. The national average is 50%. We also know that our special needs students are graduating at 70% in 5 years. That's a statistic way beyond what you'd find anywhere else. So that in itself, there's a gap from 70 to roughly 90. We have to work on that, but that's still far greater. We have to provide that. So I'm sitting here telling you that we are not doing what we should do, and this is a plan to go after that, because if we don't, we have no chance of going after the kinds of concerns you've raised. It's a tough moment for Weston. We're putting forward a budget request in growth well beyond what Weston's used to seeing, but it's one rooted in the kind of things you're willing to share at this point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edgar, did you want to?
Okay, sure. And Maria, I do. I applaud you for standing up and saying that. And I think from Dr. McCursey's comments, and also the fact that my board voted 7-0 to approve this investment, we recognize there are challenges. We recognize that there is a need for improvement, and we are taking those steps. And we want this to be a collaborative process. But that doesn't negate the fact that it does create an additional burden. And these are hard conversations that we all have to have. But it's important that we have an open, respectful conversation about it that can address all of these concerns. But trust me, we know we have a room for improvement, and we're taking those first steps. Thank you.
For something completely different, I thought I'd make sort of a public service announcement, because I know it's of interest to a lot of people in the room, which is the dog park. The dog park's coming back to the Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday. And I know we have a lot of Planning and Zoning Commissioners here, so I'm giving them an alert as well. I'm the chair, obviously, so what I would intend to recommend is, A, that the dog park agenda item be covered pretty quickly on Monday. We're not going to make a decision. So to the extent that we have a lot of people interested, we have a rather small seating area, and you're going to wind up standing in the hallway and really not hearing anything, because the fire marshal doesn't let us put 1,000 people in the hearing room. And then we would set up a special meeting later in the month of February for the sole purpose of considering the dog park, hearing everyone's perspective, and then giving our response to the request for a report. We can neither compel a dog park, nor can we prevent a dog park. The sole purpose of our hearing is to decide whether the sole effect of our hearing is to decide whether a town meeting is required or not. And in fact, I think Chris and the Board of Selectmen have already committed themselves to having a town vote on this matter. So it will be interesting what we do, but we will not be the determining factor in whether there's in fact a dog park in this town. But I wanted you to be aware on Monday, so that we don't crowd the planning and zoning room with a lot of people who will be disappointed, because we're not making a decision on Monday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have another question? Another shot for you? Okay.
I'm back.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Dr. McCursey and Gina. I appreciate it. Okay, this is about the dog park. Ken, it's my understanding that planning and zoning's sole job is to decide if a dog park is appropriate to go on the Moore property, not to decide for it to go to a town vote. They've already decided it's going to a town vote.
Right.
The 824 is to decide, and Chris, maybe you can help me out here, or Brian, or Stefan. This is what I've been told all along, that planning and zoning's job is to decide, is it an appropriate spot for a dog park? For that proposal.
There's a you want to describe what the twist is? They can't do that, but there's they vote no. Well,
that's actually not. we need to talk more about that point. So,
Not right now, though.
Sorry.
I don't think it's really a problem. I don't, we'll deal with that other issue. No, here's the deal. Just to give you probably TMI, the state law mandates that when the municipal government wants to do something with municipal property, it has to come to us for a, quote, report, unquote. The report goes to the appropriateness in our minds of the use of that particular government property. Under our local zoning laws, we have no power over municipal property. We can only render the report. When I talk about the town meeting and the town vote, all I'm saying is, as a practical matter, if we say yes to a town proposal, whatever it may be that comes to us, then the selectmen on their own can go ahead and implement that proposal. To the extent we say no, they can override our no by calling a town meeting and getting the majority vote in favor of the thing that we said no to. That's the sole practical effect of what we do in that area. I hope that answers your question.
Well, then my question is, why is it going before planning and zoning if the Board of Selectmen have already committed to sending it to a town vote?
Because state law requires it to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission. 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes, if
Okay.
you'd care to read it.
I understand.
So provides.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
throw out there that it's also a wise and prudent thing to do because they are our town elected experts in the area, and their opinions are important going forward. So throw that out there too.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Someone? Yeah?
Question/commentary, and I apologize if I'm short of breath. I've been sick for a while. FETMA November Trail, and I'm going to follow up and return to special education quickly. And my concern arises from the way, Dr. McCursey, that you characterize the budget as special ed is the only part that got an increase. And the reason I'm concerned about that is it feels like you're pitting the town from the most vulnerable against everybody else, and it sets us back. So it's a question of tone, and it starts from the top, so it starts with you. So I'd like to see it shift in that I am very familiar with financial obligations associated with special ed. It was a conscious decision based on our personal circumstances that not only did we outplace my child because Weston could not handle them, but we independently chose to finance that without asking Weston to assist because we were looking out for the town and we were able to do it. Okay, but not everybody in this town is able to. And these children run the gamut from people who are unable to read, unable to walk independently, to people who are suicidal, to people who have homicidal words coming from their mouth. They are the full gamut, and my son covers almost all of this, quite frankly. Okay, these are the children who are part of this town, who feel excluded, even when we are supposed to have an inclusive school system. It doesn't happen. Everyone's best intents, it doesn't happen. And so when you start pitting, oh, the special education budget is the only part that got an increase, what I hear is every other parent in town saying, well, why the hell do they get that benefit? As opposed to, these are the children who truly need help. And they are entitled to the best education, not the best. I'm sorry, I know the legal standard. They're not entitled to the best education. All they need to do is get by. And I thought Weston was better than that, but I understand you have legal obligations and financial, but the tone starts from the top. Thank you.
Thank you.
All I'm going to say is I appreciate your passion and your emotion. And this is an incredibly difficult, complicated issue. My first phrase here and ongoing is embrace. We are embracing all our students. And for a town that typically sees a 1.5% increase in the budget, and there is about 1.4 million increase on the other side, mashed against about 1.5 million in reductions. But my approach, and there are going to be people who disagree with me, others have come forward and said thank you from various communities, is embrace all our students. I've said in every faculty meeting I've been in, I've done 3 or 4 now, because we are reducing staff. I'm saying this is about embracing all our students at different points in different budget cycles in different years, because we truly look long-term. It's this budget, we look multi-year. This is a time for us to embrace the needs of our special ed families and students, to do much, much better for them. This is why we need to do this. And it may not be seen this way, but again, the Board of Ed said that embracing approach, doing what we can to do that much better, is what we're doing here. It's an incredibly difficult and emotional issue, and I appreciate you getting so direct with me. That's what we need. And there'll be different points of view on this, but again, I start out and I'll keep saying it's embracing all our students, because I know exactly what you're saying. And I appreciate your emotion and spirit.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have a few minutes left if someone wants to get up. Harvey, are you making your way back there? Okay.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt for just a second, if I could. I have to leave, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
And I just wanted to thank you, and also to shout out to the town manager, to the Board of Ed chair, to the first selectman, who have stayed very close and in communication to us when we're going to go through a very difficult budget process. And we ask you to continue that outreach to us. We want to work very closely together so that we can move forward in the best interest of Weston. And thank you to the league.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand people have to leave, that's fine.
I'm
Helen?
I'm Helen DeKaiser, Salem Road. Been in town for 33 years and appreciate immensely what I'm hearing today, because I hear an aim toward inclusiveness of all of the residents of Weston that I think is very, very welcome, and really something that a tremendous number of people who live in this town with children in the schools or without them have been longing to hear. And I think one of the other aspects of change that I hope will happen is an inclusiveness of all of the residents, meaning the seniors, all the way through, who wish to age in place. And a facility study, which has just been completed, and the town plan in its 10-year cycling, and other factors are all conspiring in a very positive way to bring us to a moment where maybe we need a mediator. That wouldn't be a terrible idea, ombudsman and mediators, to help us all look more deeply at the character of our community and what we should be doing to have a vision about long-range land and facilities use planning. There is a league position on this subject, and we have always kind of been reluctant to have that deeper conversation together without defensiveness. And I love the spirit of you, Dr. McCursey, and you, Gina, about embracing a wider conversation. I hope we do that.
Thank you. Harvey?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Harvey Bellin, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Harvey Bellin, Maple Street, Georgetown, Weston.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say some nice things to people with a few shout-outs.
Okay.
My first shout-out is to our Board of Selectmen, our town administrator, and Randy. Greg, we love you, but we have no more newspaper. You guys have picked up the slack on the Weston Town website and given us all the information we used to get from our newspaper. That's a big shout-out to you guys for doing a great job. Yeah, and we appreciate it, because, I mean, that's... You did, it's really nice. Otherwise, we wouldn't know what the hell's going on. The second is a shout out, and I'm sorry Toni left. I'm a Democrat. I used to be chairman of the Democratic Town Committee. I have all kinds of, I vote for Democrats. I want to give a shout out to our 2 Republican state senators. Unfortunately, one left. These guys stand for good stuff. They are not Trumpies. They are human beings. And particularly on environmental
Nothing personal.
issues.
He said he had to leave before.
Particularly on environmental issues, I've got a thing that was mentioned before by a number of people, and I'll talk to the remaining Toni about it. People want to be able to better regulate the use of poison on lawns, the use of spray, tick sprays and all that crap. We'll have nice meetings here, but state law prohibits us from doing anything. And as you know, the state law says, and there was an attempt in the legislature to change this, we cannot exceed what the state law says what the state regulations are for all kinds of poisons, for dumping, pesticides, herbicides, chem lawn, and all that junk. Give us some help. Give us some help. Change it. Give us permission so that we can, and I have a suggestion of how to do it. There's obviously a difference between towns that live on wells and towns that pipe in water. It's totally different.
Well, I want to thank you for your kind words, but I also want to acknowledge Representative Adam Dunsby, who is very much active in the environmental cause, so he deserves a lot of credit as well. In saying that, look, we learn from our constituents. We live in such a beautiful part of this state, and we are intertwined with our community as well as our natural resources. It's a lesson that needs to be learned. We have a responsibility as a steward of our environment to carry it forward into future generations. It's common sense, but it needs to be expressed in a manner that people can connect to from all levels, and that's the challenge, right? Is to open up the channels of conversation, bring common values into the dialogue. There are people that, look, I don't believe in climate change. I don't believe that climate change doesn't exist. I think it's changing our environment. But there are people that serve in the legislature that genuinely feel it doesn't exist. Rather than go into our corner and not engage them, we should talk. We should learn from each other. We should interact. Perhaps facts will come out and we will all win as a greater community.
Let me suggest very quickly an alternate way of addressing it, which is there are things we just want to be able to say, yeah, people move in here. There's a guy right here in the room. Guy moved in next to him, and he clear-cut his entire property. And we can't do anything about it. We know the guy's scum. We can't stop him, okay? We have people who move in.
It's your opinion.
They love their children, they love their dogs, and they spray that damn tick spray. It's going to kill them, especially if they're pregnant and the kid's going to come out with 3 eyes.
All right, Harvey, that's great. We've got a couple of more questions, and I think
somebody else pick up on this.
All right,
All
shut
I'm
that
saying,
mic down.
Work a deal where you trade off to other communities, give them what they want, and we get what we want.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. I think we have Ann wanted to say something from the library board.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up.
As you leave the gathering this morning, if you haven't seen the renovations that have been done to the library, please take a look. We are very proud of what's been changed. The children's room will be on the agenda for this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say on a personal note, as a former parent of an outplaced special needs student, Weston does care. And we all believe in helping all of our citizens, young or old. And I think that having all of you here today is proof that we all care because we come to these events. And thank you very much.